Today we're going to be doing rear brake pads on a Maserati Spider Cambrio Corsa, also known as the 4200. So walk you through what you need to do, what you need for parts, and what you need for tools to do it. Although it's Italian and sometimes people get scared of working on these things, it's really not much different than any other car when you get down to the basic mechanics. It's still a car with four wheels. So the first thing I always do, pop the hood. You're going to need to take off the this little cover here, just so that you can get in there and see your brake fluid reservoir. As you're doing this, if your pads are worn like mine are, you're going to be forcing some fluid back up into that reservoir that you're probably going to need to take a little syringe and take it out. So just for comparison purposes, here is the old pad. And here is the new pad. So obviously we've got our mileage out of those brake pads, and it's time for new ones. They just started squeaking just a little bit, really not even bad, amazingly, considering how worn those are. So you're gonna need a few things. You need a floor jack. You're gonna want to have a stand for safety, obviously, once you have the car up. C-clamp you probably don't need. I don't, but I have it here just in case. Some of the pistons can be a little bit more firm to push in than others, but typically on these rear calipers there's 4 pistons, and I was able to push them in on the other side no problem. A little bit of brake lubricant. You're going to need a 17mm wrench, a 17mm socket, and a 19mm socket. The 17mm is because you have to remove the sway bar link, and I'll show you what that is, just to access the bolts or the caliper. Torque wrench for the bolts on the caliper, as well as the lug nuts once you put the wheel back on. Would recommend an air wrench or impact gun, either electric or air. You can do it certainly without those, but that makes the job easier. And a little something to kneel on, because it is bikini season after all, and I don't want to have banged up knees. So I'm going to start by getting this car lifted up off the ground here, and we'll come back once I have that done. Got to go into the brake pads themselves. So these are EBCs. This is their Red Stuff series. It's a performance street level. It's not their best brakes, but it's certainly more than adequate. So the part number is a DP3612C, and this cross references to the Maserati, but in a lot of sites it doesn't. It comes up as a Porsche 911, which share the same Brembo calipers as the Maserati. So the key with owning a Maserati is to do your best to find parts that are not for Maserati, so you don't get the Maserati tax. In some cases, actually in a lot of cases, Ferrari parts are cheaper, because Ferrari is a higher production vehicle versus this was a very, very limited production car. So if you're in need of brakes, these run about $110 delivered, which is a whole lot cheaper than anything you'd see from Maserati on that. So we got it shocked up here, and zip off these wheels first. And there's the compressor right on cue. Do my best to show you where the problem is. Forgive that it's a little dirty in here, but this is tough to do. Alright, so what we have here is, where's my finger? Here's my finger. This is your sway bar. Connects to a link that goes down to the bottom of whatever the hell I guess you call it, the hub. So this needs to come out, and the way we get that out is by backing off the nut. Can you see it? No, we can't see it. You're gonna have to trust me. Oh, there we go. So there's a nut right there. We're gonna be taking that off. That's the 17mm, while holding a wrench. Focus, you fuck. Holding a wrench right in here. There's a 17mm slot cut into this bolt, so we can spin that off. Take this link, drop it down out of the way, because that allows us then to access the bolts for the caliper itself to release the caliper. So I'm going to get that part done here. And so we got our bolt undone here, and I'm just going to basically pull that out and let her lay down. so that we have full access to our bolts. Only other thing to be mindful of on that part is making sure that you don't have any tension on that sway bar. I've got one side of the car jacked up and the other side down, and there's basically no tension on it. Alright, so now we're ready. We have access. We can pull out the 19mm socket, and again, you can do this with an air or without. But we're going to remove that caliper. We'll have one nut with the washer. And the next one, and the washer just fell off. There it is. Usually what I'll do is I'll give it a little twist backwards and forwards to open up that opening a little and make it easier to slide off. There we go. Nope, still fighting me. There it is. Okay. Alright, next step, focus. Just grabbed a piece of hardwood flooring. I pulled out the pad on the far side here so that I had room for my C-clamp. And I'm using the old pad, and with that we're just going to crank it down and slowly compress those cylinders until this gap is gone. The pad's seated all the way up against the caliper itself, and I'll be doing the same thing on the other side, or I'll try to hand push those in. Actually, I'll be able to hand push those ones in. I feel like that one at least feels like it's moving. And once we have these fully retracted, we'll start getting on the new pads and getting them lubed up. Alright, so now we're ready to work with the new pads here. So I'm going to take a little bit of the brake lubricant, and that's the mistake most people seem to make, is putting too much on there. You really don't need much, and it's just on the contact surfaces where this thing needs to slide, which on this particular car is on the long sides and in the center where my thumb is right now. Alright, so right in this area. And again, a dab will do you on this. You put too much on there, it gets all gooped up, or worst case, it ends up on the pad itself, which is not exactly what you want from a friction surface. So we'll just pop these guys right in and do the same thing for the other one. Forgot to mention, also going to put some on the pad here where it contacts the pistons themselves. Some people do, some people don't. I figure you might as well do it anyway. It just eliminates any chattering between the piston and the backing plate here. So not a bad idea, just a very thin coat. Our calipers are all loaded with the new pads, they're ready to go. The only other thing I'm going to do to prep, my rotor is in great shape, but I'm going to be taking some 80 grit sandpaper and, without using any patterns, scuffing this up. And that's another debatable topic as to whether or not you need to do it. Here's the reason why I do it, and take from that what you will. What is on this pad material, there's a break-in film, and what it does is it actually deposits some of the pad material on the rotor. So you've got the friction material against the friction material that's on the rotor to help improve your braking. If I were to not prep this pad by sanding it, I'm left with a really smooth surface, and it's difficult for that transfer process to happen. When you put a small scuff to that surface, and it doesn't need to be much, I'm just going to take some 80 grit sandpaper and randomly scuff it on both sides. It helps to bed that brake pad to the rotor, get some of that material on here, and results in improved braking without putting a ton of effort into the pedal. So I'm going to do that process next, and then we'll be ready to slide the caliper back over the rotor and bolt everything back together. Probably kind of tough to tell, but that rotor is scuffed up enough to, and I try to keep it opposite of the way it would normally go, but no real rhyme or reason to it. Just helps that pad material get picked up in those little scratches that are in the surface. All right, all set to zip our caliper back in. that's a fun one. Okay. And we can connect our sway arm, our sway bar link. Sliding that guy through. I actually found on this one, driver's side is a little different from the passenger side. Passenger side, it was easier to use a socket. On the driver's side, it's actually impossible to use a socket, even with a swivel, so you end up needing two 17mm wrenches for this particular side. It's just a really tight area with a lot going on, so you use the tools you got. Get that guy spun on and zipped in. I'll cut the video to save you the time. Which is all zipped up tight here, ready to put the tire back on, which is always fun. Let's see, yeah. So this really isn't that much different than any other car as far as the brake job itself goes. The only little trick is that sway bar link that's in the way, but that's not it's not uncommon to have something like that on any type of car that you have to remove first. And like I say, you order the parts for the Porsche 911. I think Maserati Life, the website with the forums, has a list of different cars that the brakes are interchangeable on, if you need to look them up. So that's about it. So I'll drop it down to the ground here. We'll put the torque wrench on those lugs, and I torque them to 80 foot-pounds. And job's done. Brakes are as good as new. So hopefully this helped you if you plan on taking this on yourself and avoiding the ridiculous dealer fees. And if you have any questions, as always, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be happy to do what I can for you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.